Okay, aloha students. Sorry I'm out today again. I'm have meetings that I have to attend. So I'm going to give you these notes on here, and then you can copy the notes and then solve the problems based on these. Okay, so today we're talking about square root. Okay, so the square root has a symbol, as you know, that looks like this. It's kind of like this, and then whatever's being square rooted is on the inside. So you know that squared is to the power of 2, and the square root will reverse it. So let's think about a number like 3 squared. So 3 squared means 3 times 3, which is 9. So if we wanted to find the square root of the square root of 9, it would be 3. So when I have square root of 9, that reverses that squared and becomes 3. Okay? The secret to solving square roots, in my opinion, is to look for pairs of numbers. For example, if I had the square root of 25, we're going to first break it down into 5 times 5. So what you look for is look for pairs multiplied underneath the square root. And when you have a pair like that, you can pull it out as one of those numbers. Okay, so I would pull out 1, 5, and this would just become 5. So when we have a pair, we find just like what I just said. When we have a pair, we find that and we pull it out, and so it becomes 5. If there's things still underneath that can't be paired, they got to stay. They got to stay under the square root. Okay? Square root can be found on most any calculator, but be careful because it'll give you a rounded answer many times. This is because some square roots are not an exact answer. For example, the square root of 2 is an approximate answer because square root of 2, right? 2, there's no two numbers that are paired that I can pull out. So I'm left with just finding the square root of 2. And the calculator will give you this answer 1.4141212 and on and on and on. It's what's called an irrational number because we cannot find the exact value for it. We can only estimate it. And so when you do this, we're going to use, if we're estimating, we're going to use an estimated symbol, which it looks like this. But we'll get to that later. For now, what I want you to do is to leave the numbers under the square root. So let's look at this problem. Remember to look for pairs, and sometimes you have to leave part of it still in the square root. So square root of 50. So the square root of 50 breaks down to 2 times 25, okay? And then 25 breaks down into 5 times 5. So what I get is I've broken down 50 into 2 times 5 times 5. So there are a pair of 5s which I can pull out as 1, 5. Remember, when I find those pairs, I pull it out as one of those because it's square root. Square root means that you have to have these pairs to pull one out. And the 2 can't do anything with, so my answer is 5 square roots of 2. And again, this cannot be really checked very carefully on the calculator because the calculator would do 5 times this crazy number, which doesn't help you. So what we want to do for these problems is just leave them in the square root. Let's try this next one. So this one says square root of 48, okay? So 48 is going to be 4 times 12, okay? But keep going, right? This can still be broken down. So it's 4 times 12 is 3 times 4. No problem. Now I could break these down into twos, but notice I have the pair I need. I have this 4 and I have this 4, which I can pull out as 1, 4. Okay? Now, we haven't gotten to this yet, but if there's a number on the outside here, you just multiply it by whatever here. And we'll do an example of that coming up. But I pull out the 4, because there's a pair of 4s, and I'm left with the square root of 3 underneath. So it's 4 square roots of 3. That's my answer. Okay? And it's equal because that's an exact answer. And again, square root of 3, if you put it in the calculator, you're going to get a messy number. So leave it like this. Okay, let's look at a couple more. If they have variables, we're going to use the same approach. So the square root of x squared, again, we look at x squared as x times x, right? And so we have two x's. Aha, I can pull that out. So this just becomes x. So the square root of x squared is just x. This one's a little more complicated. So what we want to do is break down the numbers inside. We have 3 square root. I have x squared, so I have x times x. Y to the third is 3y's. Y times y times y. Okay, I have a pair of x's. I can pull that out as 1x. I have a pair of y's. I can pull that out as 1y. But what I have on the outside, remember, whatever's here, I multiply. Okay, I multiply all these, so it's 3xy. And on the inside, I'm stuck with 1y because it's under the square root. And that's my answer. Okay, so the 3's outside. I've pulled out an x and a y because I had them as pairs. And then I'm left with 1y on the inside. Okay, I'm going to start another video so it doesn't get too long. Hope this helps. Okay, we're on to the back page. So the front page, you're going to have some problems in homework number 10, where you'll be practicing some of these problems and solving them. Okay, but now we're going on to another little subject here. So square root equations. So remember how we did absolute value and you got two answers. So remember the absolute value of x equaling 4. X would either equal 4 or it would equal -4. Do you remember that? So because this absolute value converts it to a positive, we could put in 4 or -4 in here. The reason I share that is because we are in a similar situation with x squared. So let's look at an example and what answers make it true. So here we're looking for x squared equals 4. So what x values can I square to get 4? Well, the obvious one is x equals 2. So because 2 squared is 4, right? But the one that's not so obvious is that x could equal -2. X can equal -2 because -2 squared, right? -2 times a -2 becomes a +4. So there's actually two solutions to that. There's either x equals 2 or x equals -2, which is very similar to what we did with absolute value, okay? So remember that the opposite of multiplication is division. The opposite of squared is square root. When solving for a problem with x squared, we can do the opposite and take the square root of both sides. However, we still have two answers for x, usually, right? If x is 0, then we only have one answer. So we have to be careful with this. So let's ask again, if we have x squared equals 5, what are my two solutions? So it's x equals 5, correct. 5 squared is 25. Or x can equal -5, right? Because -5 times -5 becomes a 25. Let's go to this one. So if we want to solve this, we know, yeah, you know it's 7. Okay, but let's see how we would solve this if it was a number we didn't know. So our procedure based on this is we got to get rid of the x squared, and we're going to do the opposite, which is square root. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Now, we have to be careful because if I just wrote x equals, 7, the square root of 49 is 7, I would lose one of the answers, right? I'd lose that negative answer. So what we're going to do whenever we take a square root of x squared, we're going to put plus or minus here, okay? The plus or minus will help us make sure that we get both answers. And so what we've got now is we've got x, right? X squared, square root is just x, is going to equal plus or minus the square root of 49. That's one you can do on your calculator, but let's do it like we've been doing it. And so it's plus or minus the square root. We break down 49 into pairs. It's 7 times 7. I can pull it out as 1, 7, and our answer becomes plus or minus 7. So we had two answers for this, right? We had 7 squared is 49, or minus 7 squared is 49, because -7 times -7 equals 49, positive 49. Okay, so when we're doing these problems, we just have to make sure when we take the square root, we do a plus or minus to show that we don't lose one of the answers, because there's going to be two usually, unless we're square rooting 0, which would only have one answer. Now, let's do something a little bit more complicated, okay? Let's say we have x plus 2 squared equals 9. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the square root of both sides, because this whole thing is squared. Over here, I take the square root of 9, but remember, I need my plus or minus. So what I get here is this is x plus 2 times x plus 2, so it just becomes x plus 2. And this becomes plus or minus the square root of 9, okay? The square root of 9 is 3 times 3, or just 3. So I have x plus 2 equals plus or minus 3, okay? Now I just solve this like I usually would to get x by itself. I subtract 2 from both sides, and I get x equals -2 plus or minus 3. Okay? That means there's two solutions. Let's find them. So we have one solution where it's x equals negative 2 plus 3, or one solution where it's x equals negative 2 minus 3. So my answers are x equals 1 or x equals negative 5. Now, what we want to do over here is we want to check these. Let's see if we got these right. Okay, so we're going to check if it's 1 or negative 5. So I start with x plus 2 squared equaling 9. And I'm going to plug in 1 into this. So I'm going to plug in x equals 1. So when I do that, I get 1 plus 2 squared equals 9. Well, that's 1 plus 2 is 3. Remember, in parentheses, exponents first in PEMDAS. So this is 3 squared equals 9, and 9 equals 9. That checks. So x equals 1 is one of our solutions. Now, let's try x equals negative 5, okay? So we're going to go x plus 2 squared equals 9, and I'm going to plug in negative 5 here. So I have negative 5 plus 2 squared equals 9. Negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3 squared, okay? Negative 3 squared is negative 3 times negative 3, which becomes positive 9. So 9 equals 9. That also checks. So these two are our solutions, and we found it doing this formula, okay? I hope this helps. I'm going to make one more video for the third page. We're on to the third video. Okay, so in the second video, we did some equations here, right, with square roots and solved them. So this one is just a little bit more complicated with our solutions. So in this one, what we're going to do is it says, for these below, you will need to move the negative 4 to the other side first before taking the square root. So what we have to do is, we can't take the square root like we did in this equation, yet. Okay, we can't do that yet because we don't have the square root by itself. We don't have the squared by itself. So what we have to do is get that 4 over first. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides, and then I get x minus 3 squared equals 4. Now I can take the square root of both sides, okay? So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Now remember, when I do that, I got to have plus or minus. So on this side, I get x minus 3, because I take it out of the squared, right? Squared, square root, cancel each other out. On this side, I have plus or minus the square root of 4. Square root of 4 is 2 times 2. That's a pair. We can pull it out. So we have x minus 3 equals plus or minus 2. Okay? I'm going to move this up here so I can finish. I have x minus 3 plus or minus 2. Ah, I did it wrong. Equals. Let me just rewrite it. X minus 3 equals plus or minus 2. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So I get x equals 3 plus or minus 2. Okay? We got to finish the problem because this isn't enough to give me an answer. If this was just a square root here, that's fine, you can leave it. But in this format, we should finish it. So this is either, right, this is going to be either x equals 3 plus 2 or x equals 3 minus 2. So our answers become x equals 5 or x equals 1. Okay, see how I did that? All right, so we're going to try the next two. I'm just going to do these next two here. If you want to pause the video and then come back and try these, and then you can come back and see if you got them right, that's fine. But I'm going to keep going. Okay. So again, what we have to do is move this 16 first to the other side because the square root has to be by itself. Okay, now I have it by itself. I can take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus or minus. So I have x minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 16. Now I haven't been doing this, but let me show you what I do here, right? 16 is 4 times 4. Remember, anytime I can get a pair, I can pull it out. Okay? So what I have now is I have x minus 3 equals plus or minus 4. I can now add 3 to both sides, and I get x equals 3 plus or minus 4. Okay? I'm done, sort of, but I really need to figure out what the two numbers are. So I have x equals 3 plus 4 or x equals 3 minus 4. It's going to become more evident as to why we're finding two solutions when we get to parabolas and we're graphing these. When we're graphing these squared terms, we're going to have a parabola that looks like this, and we will have two x answers, and that's what these are. So we have x equals 7 or x equals negative 1. Two solutions. All right, last one here. Add 1 to both sides. Same thing, we got to get this by itself. We have x plus 4 squared equals 1. Square root of both sides. I get x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 1. Oh, nice. The plus square root of 1 is 1 because 1 times 1 would be my pair. So this becomes x plus 4 equals plus or minus 1. Subtract 4 from both sides and you get x equals negative 4 plus or minus 1. Look for my two solutions, right? My two solutions are going to be x equals negative 4 plus 1 or x equals negative 4 minus 1, right? Two solutions. Okay, so x is going to equal negative 3 or x is going to equal negative 5. Those are my two answers. I've completed the problems that you can for your notes. So this completes our notes for this section. And so what you're going to do now is you're going to do homework number 10, which is more problems like this. So you can refer back to these notes or these videos if you want. And then if you complete homework number 10, please make sure that you've completed the matrix practice we did in the last class, and then also completed the exponent practice on the back side of that rules of exponents. Okay, thank you. Have a great day.